All right. Well, the media wants to tell you that you don't care enough about climate change. And for that reason, we are all going to be terrorized by young people, climate activists, until we do, until we get it straight, like this.
These idiots.
Security.
Throwing soup on a Van Gogh.
That is a Van Gogh, an original, at a gallery in London.
And then gluing yourself to a wall with super glue. Like, let's put super glue on our hand and then stick our hand to the wall. This'll work. There you go.
What is worth more, art or life? Is it worth more than food? Worth more than justice? Are you more concerned about the protection of a painting or the protection of our planet and people?
Okay. They looked very proud of themselves for that act of vandalism.
All I'm going to say is, what the hell kind of tomato soup is that color? Ugh.
I know. Well,
like
it's canned.
Heinz.
So there's a lot of bisphenol in that.
I saw it. It's kind of an aside, but it was really funny. But I saw, when I first saw this video, it was on Reddit, and I saw somebody had commented underneath it, and they were like, somebody should go throw flowers at an Andy Warhol painting because of the whole can of soup thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I like that. Now, okay, my visceral reaction to that is you're being a brat and you lack perspective of people's situations in the world. But these are young people who have climate anxiety, and I think the media shares the blame for that. So let's get to the media. Now, I'm not saying that there is not a net negative effect on climate because of climate change, or that the climate is not of concern, but I am saying that the media is banking on all of us being innumerate and scaring us in the wrong ways that are not helpful. Now, when I say innumerate, I mean that in the sense of when you're illiterate, you can't read or make context of reading. When you're innumerate, you don't understand numbers and you can't make context from them. And the media sort of banks on that. So here's a headline from Reuters today. Concern about climate change shrinks globally as threat grows. So what they're saying is you care less even though it is important. You just don't know that because you're ignorant. Now, there are two big assumptions here. One, people don't care about the environment. Two, the planet is a major threat to your existence. Where they're getting this from is the World Risk Poll from Lloyd's Register and Gallup. The study includes results from 125,000 people in 121 countries across all global regions. They're looking at resilience specifically. How do communities survive when exposed to natural disasters? And they just blanketly link these natural disasters to climate change, even though many of them we can't necessarily link to climate change. Scientists sort of postulate that they do, or they hypothesize, but that data is not in. We've covered it a lot on this show. Now, Gallup wasn't measuring really how much people care about climate change, which is what Reuters extrapolated. After reading this report, I honestly can't see how Reuters took that away from the report. The report is about how people cope. Do they have neighborhood help? Do they have money? Do they have family? Can they depend on their government? So you might not be surprised to know that the wealthiest nations scored the highest on resilience. They can cope with natural disasters.
Oh, I wonder why.
So the main takeaway here is that lower income people are less resilient. So we should take away conveniences and make their life harder, I guess, according to those climate activists.
All of those countries, I mean, if you can look at that chart, all of those countries have something in common, right? They're all industrialized, and they've all gotten that way thanks to petroleum products, thanks to oil, thanks to powerful machines that helped build homes, that protected them against and allowed them to cope against hurricanes and disasters and all sorts of stuff.
Right. The report is predicated on
was in the print that was on their T-shirts.
Right. Or where did the T-shirt come from? Was it shipped on a boat that used fossil fuels?
Did they shear a goat themselves and then like weave it together?
What about their cans? What about their pink hair dye? Like where that
the cans is the most offensive part. Like I'm someone who really doesn't like canned food because of the bisphenol, because it's in the food, right? And so, okay.
Don't get her started.
So this whole report is predicated on the fact that more and more people will experience natural disasters due to climate change, even though, again, that link is tenuous. But the data does not actually support that even in this report. It shows all of these regions where people have experienced these different things: heavy flooding, hurricane, earthquake, drought. But the majority of most populations have not experienced a natural disaster. This column on the right shows that the majority of people actually haven't. Reuters reports in this article the findings of the survey released this week show that fewer people see climate change as a serious threat when you compare the 2021 survey with the 2019 survey. But just a few things. First, the data about perceived threat was not released this week. That was released in late September in the first volume. So Reuters is playing loose with this data set. That was an old data set that they're saying came out this week. So that's kind of sloppy. And this week's data, volume 2, only shows a difference between people who have experienced disaster and people who were not. So I don't know why they would just fudge their reporting, I guess because they assume you won't read it. So, but about perception that came out in September, not this most recent one. Reuters headline, again, is way off when they tell us that concerns about climate change shrink. More people are actually reporting they don't know whether or not the environment is a major threat. They're not saying, in fact, if you look at these numbers, 2019 to 2021, more people report that they're just not sure, not that they think it's not a concern. There's a lot of double negatives here, and I'm sorry, it's not my choice to lay out the data this way. So my point is that they assume you won't read this, and now you don't have to because I've done it for you. Although you are, of course, free to do it yourself. I will link to it in the chat. But the data doesn't show that people care less about climate change. It may show they're less convinced that it is a serious threat to existence, and rightly so, right? Because and again, this is a problem of being innumerate. If you can't interpret data, you believe any old BS, any old shocking headline, and then you feel like you need to throw soup around. Now, we've spoken many times about how climate models may actually show that fewer people than ever before are at risk of dying from natural disasters. You can look up our interview we did with Bjorn Lundberg. You can look up the segment we did recently about hurricanes in Florida. We are very seldom told any positive changes to the planet, and the media acts like humans are some kind of stupid trolls that when the environment changes, will just stand there and like not get out of the way of a hurricane or not buy an air conditioner if it gets hot. Here is another example of how the media covers climate change. This is Roger Pielke Jr., a political scientist and professor who studies these models at the University of Colorado Boulder.
This is a figure, and if you follow me on Twitter or on The Honest Broker, you've seen versions of this, and I update it every year as new data comes in. But what it shows is continental United States landfalls of Category 1 and stronger storms from 1900 to 2021. And the red line there is just a simple linear least squares regression. It looks like it's going down a little, but don't read anything into that. What we can say about this is it's not going up. And I have a lot of fun on Twitter and with journalists at big data journalism outlets and other places, because this figure, to my knowledge, has never been produced in the mainstream media. Which is shocking to me because the mainstream media loves to do graphs and data. The landfall record in the United States doesn't go up. It's contrary to a lot of claims that are made. I was then interested to learn that actually it did appear in the mainstream media just a couple weeks ago. This is Bill Nye, the science guy, on CNN. Now, he's got my figure. This is it. This is that exact figure. He's holding it. And what he did, someone put a title here that said no increase in hurricane frequency, referring to the landfalls. That's true. That's an objectively true statement. He took a Sharpie, crossed out no, and emphasized increase. Now, if you're familiar with Sharpies and hurricanes and Donald Trump, there's some irony there. But this is about as straightforward misinformation as you can find. There's not an increase. And Bill Nye said that this is misleading information, which is interesting. So here's my graph, and there you can see it. So it's been in the mainstream media. I don't know if I can make that claim anymore. Some people would like to see what the most intense hurricanes are. This is category.
Okay, so actually what Bill Nye was doing in that CNN clip is referring to that chart being used on Fox the day before. And someone on Fox said, see, this shows a decreased incidence in high category hurricanes making landfall. And he said, no, that's not true. And he just crossed it out and said, I don't like this, and I'm going to interpret it this way. So, how do you get away with that Sharpie trick? I guess we're okay with it because we collectively like Bill Nye.
Don't say that.
Well,
who collectively
not
likes him?
we, but
Okay.
I mean, that's why CNN let him get away with it instead of saying, oh, should you not cross out the word no on that data, which is a clear downward slope. So now on to climate terrorists, people who think that destroying society based on this type of reporting, do we think that they're going to get us to change our behaviors and save the planet? Look at this butthead.
Does this ever work? Like, if you want to draw people to your cause, does this ever work? Like sitting in the streets and holding hands and blocking cars? Like,
spraying spray paint on an Aston Martin. Like I went outside to check my Aston Martin after this just to make sure there was no orange paint on it.
And it was okay.
Well, but my other two Aston Martins were fine, but there was one that had there was a little scuff mark on it.
And it really taught you a lesson.
It really did. This guy.
Okay, so he's going to yell about fossil fuel and the government making, increased investments in fossil fuel while he did that, and he sure showed us. This was posted on Twitter by Michael Schellenberger, author of Apocalypse Never. I am reading this book currently, and it's fascinating about what the data says versus what public perception tells us. So we're going to have to deal with more like this because what the media reports has an effect. It's scaring people. They feel these things. I think these people absolutely believe this, that this is the only way to get our attention but they're not sitting down pouring through charts. They're listening to what Greta Thunberg says, what the media says. They're not actually reading the data. I know these, you know how young people can feel so principled about something and they really feel like they're changing the world. And I can sort of relate to being young and passionate about something, but at this stage of my life, I just want to ground them and take away their iPhones.
I felt the same way.
Yeah.
I went to Occupy Wall Street, but I went to Washington, and it was I was so frustrated because there were so many people in New York at the stock exchange, and that's one branch of the problem. The root is in Washington. Washington is the root of all these problems. I'm why are you guys in New York on this little branch that you're not going to change? They got some attention and everything, but they're not seeing the core of the problem. And I feel like that's what happens is they get misguided and they think this is going to solve the problem, this one little thing. But you got to fix the core of the government before you can even think about fixing those problems.
And the things that they want are not actually going to fix the environment. They want less fossil fuels. They want things that, are just extremely classist and that will hurt a lot of poor people first. But they don't know that because they don't read economic models.